Amara was the kind of woman who remembered everyone's birthday but forgot her own. She was the one who stayed late to help a colleague finish a report, who brought soup to a sick neighbor without being asked, who laughed easily and loved deeply, and never once thought that those qualities could be used against her. She lived in a small but cheerful flat in Lagos with her best friend Kemi. The walls were decorated with her own sketches and a few photos from university. She worked as a junior architect at a firm downtown, and she was good at her job, though she had not yet let herself believe that fully. She was 26, hopeful, and entirely unprepared for Damien. She met him at a gala she almost did not attend. Kemi had practically pushed her out the door, insisting that she needed to stop spending her Friday evenings reorganizing her bookshelf. The event was crowded and a little too loud, and Amara had just decided to find a quiet corner when she turned and walked straight into a man holding 2 glasses of water. Neither glass spilled. He caught both without looking down. He just looked at her. His name was Damien. He was tall and composed, the kind of man who moved through a room as if he had already been there before. He was the founder and chief executive of a logistics company that had been expanding across 3 countries. He was 32, successful, and entirely too charming for anyone's good. He asked if she was all right. She said yes. He offered her one of the glasses of water and asked what she did. She told him. He asked a real question about it, not the polite kind that people ask before moving on, but the kind that meant he was actually listening. She answered. He laughed at something she said. She laughed at something he said. They talked for 2 hours. He called the next day, like he said he would. That small thing, that simple and ordinary thing, meant more to Amara than she could explain. She had been let down in small ways by people who made small promises, and so when someone kept a small promise, it felt enormous. Over the following weeks, he took her to dinner and to art exhibitions, and once, on a Sunday, to a fish market, because she had mentioned she liked to cook. He was present in a way that felt rare. He asked about her work, about her family back in Abadan, about the community housing project she kept in a notebook but had never found the courage to begin. He seemed to find her interesting, not just pleasant. There is a difference, and Amara had learned that difference the hard way. By the time 6 months had passed, she was in love with him. She did not say it dramatically. She simply noticed one morning that he was the first person she wanted to tell things to. Good things and bad things and ordinary things, and she understood that this was what it meant. He said it first, actually, on a quiet evening when they were sitting on her small balcony. He said it simply, without theater, and she believed him entirely. For a while, she was right too. 14 months after the gala, on a Tuesday evening that began like any other, Amara found out. She had not been looking for anything. She was not suspicious by nature. She was at his apartment waiting for him to return from a meeting, and she was sitting at his kitchen counter, reading a message from Kemi, when his tablet, which he had left open on the counter, lit up with a notification. She did not mean to read it, but the name was there, and the words were there, and once she had seen them, she could not unsee them. The name was a woman's name. The message was warm and familiar, not in the way of old friends, in the way of people who had been close for a long time and expected to remain so. Amara sat very still for several minutes. Then she put down her phone and waited. When Damien came in, he was relaxed and smiling. He kissed her cheek, he opened the refrigerator, and she said, quietly, that she had seen the message. The smile did not disappear all at once. It faded, slowly, like light going out of a room. He did not shout. He did not deny. He sat down across from her, and he explained, in the careful voice of a man who had practiced composure, that there was someone he had been with before Amara, that the situation was complicated, that his family knew this woman, that there were expectations, that it had been going on in the background, but that none of it was what it looked like, because what he had with Amara was real, and he had not known how to end the other thing, and he was sorry, and he would fix it. His eyes filled with tears. Once, briefly. Amara looked at him for a long time. She should have stood up and walked out. She knew it, somewhere deep and quiet inside herself. But she looked at the man she had spent 14 months loving, and she thought about all the small promises he had kept, and she thought about the Sunday at the fish market, and she convinced herself that love was supposed to be tested, and that choosing to stay through difficulty was what maturity looked like. She forgave him. She told him clearly that she would not share him, that if he wanted her, then that had to mean something real. He agreed. He was earnest about it. He seemed genuinely relieved, and she mistook his relief for gratitude, and his gratitude for love. The next year was the most exhausting of her life, though she would not have admitted that at the time. She became more careful, more attentive. She told herself she was choosing generosity, but she was actually managing fear. She stopped mentioning the community housing project because she had once noticed a small shift in his expression when she talked about her ambitions, something that lasted only a second, but she had seen it, and she had started to edit herself quietly, trimming away the parts that might make him feel something uncomfortable. She told herself this was love. This was compromise. This was how adults behaved. Kemi said nothing. But Kemi watched. There were small things that came back, gradually. A second phone she noticed once, and was explained away. Evenings where he returned later than his schedule suggested. The particular way his voice changed when he stepped out to take certain calls. Amara noticed all of it. She noticed, and she explained it to herself, one thing at a time, in the kindest possible terms, because she had already forgiven him once, and it felt important to be consistent. Then, on a Wednesday afternoon 16 months after the first betrayal, she found out again. She was not snooping. She was not suspicious. She was at his home office, looking for a charger he had said she could borrow, and his laptop was open on the desk, and the email was there on the screen, and this time, it was not a message from the same woman. It was a message to a different woman entirely. It was about a ring. It was about a date. It was about a conversation with his mother, who was apparently very pleased. Amara read the email. She read it fully, to the end. Then she closed the laptop. She found the charger. She put it in her bag. She walked to the bathroom, locked the door, and turned on the tap. She sat down on the tile floor, and she pressed her back against the wall, and she sat there for 22 minutes without making a sound. When she came out, she collected her things from the living room. She checked that she had her keys and her phone and her bag. Then she went to the door. She did not leave a note. She did not send a message. She simply left. When she got home, Kemi was on the sofa, watching something on her laptop. She looked up when Amara walked in, and whatever she saw on Amara's face made her close the laptop immediately. She did not ask what happened. She just said, quietly, "What do we do?" Amara put her bag down. She sat on the sofa. She thought about it honestly, for the first time in a long time, without trying to arrange the truth into a shape she could tolerate. Then she said, "Nothing. I am done." And she meant it. Damien called that night. She did not answer. He called the following morning. She did not answer. He sent messages, long ones and short ones, and she read them all, but she did not reply. She was not angry. That surprised her. She had expected rage, but what she felt instead was a kind of exhausted clarity, the feeling of a person who has been holding something very heavy for a very long time and has finally decided to set it down. He reached Kemi eventually. He asked if Amara was all right, if she would talk to him, if Kemi could at least tell him where her head was. Kemi delivered Amara's response word for word, because that was the kind of friend she was. "She is fine. She is not angry. She wishes you well, and she is not available." There was nothing more to say after that. The months that followed were not easy. Amara would not pretend otherwise, even to herself. There were evenings when she sat with the loss of it, not just the loss of Damien specifically, but the loss of the future she had been quietly building in her imagination. The version of her life that had included him. That version had to be grieved, and she let herself grieve it properly. But grief, when you let it move through you rather than holding it still, eventually passes. She took the promotion she had been hesitating over for almost a year. Her supervisor had offered it to her twice, and both times she had declined with reasons that, looking back, were not really reasons at all. She took it. She opened the notebook with the community housing project, and she began, slowly, to make it real. She researched funding structures and connected with a nonprofit that was already working in the area she cared about. She started attending meetings. She started speaking in those meetings. People began to listen. She slept without her phone in the bedroom. She cooked on Sundays and shared meals with Kemi, and rediscovered that she found great pleasure in feeding people. She went back to a pottery class she had dropped 2 years earlier because the schedule had not suited Damien's. She stopped making herself smaller. She had not realized how much space she had been trying not to take up until she was allowed to expand again. It was like stepping out of a room that had been just slightly too tight, and standing in an open space, and taking a full breath. She was not the same woman she had been before him. She was not trying to be. She had learned things she could not unlearn, and some of them were painful, but some of them were genuinely useful. She knew now that forgiveness was not the same as permission. She knew that staying through difficulty was only noble if the difficulty was being honestly faced by both people. She knew that a man who cried once and then returned to his habits had not changed. She had simply given him a better position from which to repeat himself. She knew these things now. She was not bitter about them. She simply knew. 18 months after the last time she walked out of his apartment, Amara stood on a stage at an industry conference and spoke about her community housing initiative, which had by that point been adopted by a regional government body as a pilot program. There were 300 people in the room. She had not been nervous. She had prepared carefully, and she trusted her preparation, and she spoke with the natural authority of someone who had done the actual work. She did not know that Damien was in the audience until afterward. He found her during the reception. She saw him coming, and did not move toward him, or away from him. She simply waited. He said she looked incredible. She thanked him. He said he had thought about her often. She said she hoped he was well. He said the engagement had not worked out. She said she was sorry to hear that. He said that leaving her had been the worst decision he had ever made, that he understood now what he had thrown away, that he had been different since her, more serious, more aware of what actually mattered. He said it all with great sincerity, and his eyes held a particular expression, the one she used to believe entirely. She let him finish. Then she smiled. Not the cautious smile she had learned to use around him, the careful one, the managed one, the real one, the one that started in her eyes. She said, "I am really glad you are well, Damien." Then she turned and walked back to her colleagues. There was no dramatic exit, no closing speech, no moment where she let him see that she had won something, because it did not feel like winning. It felt like simply being somewhere he could no longer reach. 6 months later, Amara signed the papers for her own architecture firm. It was a small firm, 3 people, including herself and Kemi, who had decided to leave her own job and come along, which made Amara cry in the most pleasant way she had ever cried. They opened a bottle of wine that was slightly too expensive and poured it into the mismatched glasses from Amara's kitchen, and they sat on the floor of the new office because the furniture had not arrived yet, and they talked until midnight. Someone asked Amara later, at a dinner, whether she ever thought about Damien. She considered the question honestly, which was the only way she knew how to answer questions now. "Sometimes," she said, "I think about who I was when I was with him, and I feel sorry for that woman, and I feel grateful that she finally got tired enough to stop." She named the firm after her grandmother. Not after anyone who had ever needed her to be less than she was. Not after anyone who had held her love carefully for a while and then decided it was not quite what they needed after all. After herself. After the woman who had come before her and worked hard with quiet hands and asked for nothing but that the people she loved remember where they came from. Amara remembered. She always had. That was the thing about her that Damien never fully understood. He had seen her softness and mistaken it for weakness. He had seen her forgiveness and mistaken it for endlessness. He had never understood that the most patient people often have the clearest limits, and that when they finally draw a line, they draw it once, and they do not move it. She had forgiven him because she loved him. She had left him because she loved herself more. And she had built something extraordinary, not to prove a point to him, not to make him regret anything, but simply because she had always been capable of it, and she had finally stopped waiting for someone else's approval before she began. The firm grew. The housing project expanded to 2 more regions. Kemi complained cheerfully about the long hours, and then stayed late every single night. And Amara, every now and then, in the quiet moments between one thing and the next, thought about that woman on the bathroom floor, sitting against the wall with the tap running. She thought about her kindly. She thought, "You did the right thing. It took you a while, but you got there. You got there."